Hi there, it's Lisa Spangler with a video for Ellen Hutson. I'm going to be working with these Daniel Smith watercolors. They come in these tubes like this, and then you can squeeze them out onto a palette, or I like to put them in these little individual pans, and then I write the name with a Sharpie on the side of the color so I remember what it was. And Daniel Smith has these special colors in their Primatech line that are made out of natural rocks and minerals like this bronzite. And I'm going to show you more about that as we go along. I'll be working with this big brush. This is the Da Vinci number 30, and there are so many awesome techniques that you can do with this guy. So let me clear this off and let's get started. First off, let's talk a bit about water. Since these are watercolors, of course you're going to need water, but I found that the container that you use makes a big difference. So I have this mason jar here, and I only filled it about an inch full, and this way I can really swish this big brush around. I found that if you put too much water in here, you get water everywhere and make a mess. And then I wanted to show you how much water this big guy holds. So look at all that water here. It's like a lot. So I'll be showing you some techniques that you can use to make use of this property. But look at how much water. I feel like I'm in one of those Bounty quicker picker up commercials. That's a lot of water in this one brush. And of course, if you had pigment in there, that would also be a lot of pigment in the brush too. And there are so many fun things that you can do with this. So since I'm going to be working with this big guy, I'm going to be working on this little plastic palette. You could also use a plate for these techniques if you don't have a palette like this. But you just go ahead and squeeze out a little bit of color. Here I've got Hansa Yellow Medium and that bronzite. And then what I like to do is give these a little bit of mist with just a water mist bottle. And then I have this palette knife, but you could also use a butter knife or a coffee stir stick or whatever. And I like to go ahead and mix this together. Sometimes I use a brush, but then if you're not going to be using that color right away, you'll waste a lot of pigment. So I recommend using like a palette knife or a butter knife or a coffee stirrer to mix your pigments together. And I'm going to be working for this first set of cards on this Hutson watercolor paper. This paper is relatively inexpensive, so it's great for when you're just starting out and you want to practice. It has a little bit of texture to it because it is cold pressed, and that helps the granulation of the watercolor show up a lot better. So I have this template here that I've made. It's 3.5 by 4 3/4. This is just out of a piece of scrap chipboard, and I keep this with my die cuts, and because I use this size a lot. And I'm going to be working on this ampersand board. As you can hear, it's nice and sturdy. And what I do is I take those pieces of paper that I've already cut to size, and then using artist's tape, I'm going to follow those pencil marks that I made using the template, and I'm going to tape this down. And one little trick for you to help with the release of the masking tape when you go to take it off later is just stick it to your clothes before you tape it down. And that will pick up like a little bit of like lint or fuzzy things or whatever. And then this will just make it where it doesn't have as much of a chance as tearing your paper when you go to remove it at the end. Then I'm going to take my eraser and lightly erase those pencil lines. So now the fun begins. This is that big brush, and I'm going to pre-wet it in water. And as you can see, like I said, it's a really greedy brush. It really like sucks up the water or the pigment. So I kind of brushed off some of the water, and now I'm going to just like tap it on a paper towel to get rid of even more water. So I'm rubbing it on my thumb there to see how much water is left in there. And it's still pretty wet, but it's not a whole lot. And now I'm going to go ahead and load the brush up with some color. This is a sap green, and it's mixed with that beautiful bronzite that has all this shimmer. And you can see how much pigment is in the brush. And then for this first technique, we're just going to be making stripes. So just giving even pressure, you can go back and forth to get a nice clean line like that. And that masking tape on the side will help us get a nice clean line. And since my ampersand board can hold 2 pieces of paper, I'm going to be making 2 of the same card at the same time. So this is also a great technique for when you want to mass produce like Christmas cards. So look at that nice bold line that this brush makes. Next, I'm going to switch colors. So I'm going to rinse the brush, and now I'm going to go for some phthalo green, also mixed with that bronzite once again. You'll see a theme here in all the videos. I'm like showing that bronzite some love. And once again, I'm loading up the brush, just like that. And then I'll go ahead and make my stripes. And I'm leaving a little gap of white space in between these 2 stripes, this one and the one that I made previously. And that's because if you touch them together, they'll blend and start doing these different effects. And I'll show you more about that technique in another video, also for this post. So, but there you go. You can see how it really makes this really clean, beautiful stripe. So I'm going to keep going, making stripes and switching up the colors. For this one, I'm going to use quinacridone rose, also mixed with that bronzite. And I'll have the whole list of supplies for you in the blog post. So for the sake of time, I went ahead and finished up making the stripes, and I let it completely dry. So these are completely dry. You can tell that your watercolor is dry if you just lightly place the back of your hand on the piece, and if it feels dry, then you should be good to go. So, but look at how pretty the sunlight looks sparkling on there. I hope you can see this. I'll have some photos for you that hopefully you can see this sparkle better. But next I wanted to show you how to go ahead and remove the masking tape that we put on there before. You just lift up a corner and then pull it away from your project, just like that. So lifting up a corner and pulling it away from the project. And you want to pull it away from the project so that if it happens to rip, it will rip away from your project. So here are the finished stripes. And to turn these into cards, I just did some simple die cutting. I used the Peace, Joy, Love die cuts that you can see here, and then I put a little bow on the bottom. And I just think this is so cool. I have some photos here to show you so that you can see the sparkle of that bronzite. And then I went ahead and made 2 more so I could mass produce like tons of cards. Here's the close-up so that you can see it better. I love how each one is unique even though we were using the same supplies. And I love the bold stripes that that big number 30 Da Vinci brush makes. Now I'm going to switch up the color palette and show you another technique. This time I'm going to be using blues. I'll have the whole list for you in the blog post. And I'm going to be working on a porcelain plate. This plate is one that I picked up for cheap at IKEA. And I'm going to be using Arches cold press paper. This paper has a lot more of a rougher texture to it, and I found that it really shows off the granulation of some of these Daniel Smith Primatech watercolors. So I'm going to be working with this really pretty dark blue. This is iondothane blue. I know I'm not saying that right, but once again you can see the real name in the blog post. And I'm really loading up the brush here. I've got it like super loaded with water and pigment, more water than I used on the Canson paper when I was making the stripes. And I'm starting out making a stripe just as we did before and getting it all nice and juicy and really loaded with color on there. And then next I'm going to switch colors over to this really pretty phthalo green. And remember last time we left that gap in between the stripes. Well, this time we're going to let them touch, and then you'll see how the colors mingle and blend together. So I'm loading up the brush really well again. This is like really super juicy. I'm going to start a little ways down from the blue, so maybe just like about here. And then I'm going to bring this color up and let it touch the blue so it can start to mingle. I'm going to kind of brush over the top in the middle of both of them to let it blend together. And then you can see here how it's really starting to go. And then for the bottom part, I'm going to go back and add even more green. So I'm tilting the paper, it's on that ampersand board, and I've lifted it up and I tilted it so that help it even run together even more. Look at how pretty that's looking. And then when I'm working really juicy like this, I like to take a piece of paper towel and just kind of blot the ends here, just so that the paint doesn't seep underneath the tape and make a mess. Now I wanted to give it even more of that aurora borealis, like the northern lights effect. So I'm taking some more of the dark blue and I'm just adding some in a line right down the middle between the blue and the green. Look at that, how it's really starting to flow. And I wanted to mention here, just experiment and have fun with this. I have a whole Pinterest board of how the aurora looks, and it has some really unreal and crazy patterns. So you can really have fun and see how your paints blend and interact together. And if you don't like it, you can always die cut it and use it later. But I think this is going to make a really cute background for this little polar bear guy. So I'll go ahead and let those dry, and meanwhile I'm going to share another technique. I'll share another technique for another polar bear background. This is kind of like a modified Northern Lights kind of background, and this time I'm starting with the Blue Apatite Genuine, and I'm probably not saying that right either, but this paint has super granulation. It is so crazy how it makes all these little variations in the color. It's just amazing. Wait till you'll see the close-ups. But that's like kind of like about how tall he is. So I was thinking that'll kind of be like for like a iceberg kind of look. And I'm tapping in some more color here, just like that. Now switching back over to the phthalo green, I'm going to add another stripe of color, just kind of free form, right on top of there. I'm trying to decide which way to go. Let those two blend together. Maybe put a little bit more color in there. There we go. And then once again, tapping in some more of the green. It seems like when you add more paint by tapping in, that's when things really start to like mix and do crazy and wild things that are totally unexpected. Now going back to the dark blue, I'm going to add a stripe of that, just kind of free form, right at the top. Throw in some more color for that. It's kind of mesmerizing when you're watching the paint moving around on the paper, and you can always tilt it to help it blend and mingle even more. So we'll let this guy dry too. But won't that be cute? So I got a little carried away and I ended up making 4 cards from these techniques. I was just having too much fun making all those northern light backgrounds. And I wanted to start off by showing you this one. For this one, I used this little iceberg from Flora and Fauna Clear die cut, and I cut it out of gold paper. And then I cut a bunch more icebergs from pieces that I didn't like. So making use of everything and not letting any of that juicy color go to waste. And then I kind of inlaid different little segments from each one so that they give them some dimension and sparkle with the gold. So didn't that turn out cool? And then I think this is my favorite one. It has so much texture and granulation from that blue apatite. And once again, I used a scrap piece that I didn't like how it came out, and I cut the piece die cuts out of that. There's that one. Okay, so maybe this one is actually my favorite. This one I was just being kind of random and adding the color and not trying to overthink it. And I really couldn't make this again even if I tried. I love how this turned out and how you can see all the granulation. And then this one with the magic inside, I literally thought this came out good too. And once again, making use of a little scrap piece. I didn't like how the bottom part of that came out, so I cut it out and put it on there on the inside. So here you can see the front again, and I added some splatters of white on there. And then here's the inside, and I plan on having snowflake confetti drop out of there when someone opens the card. Okay, so moving on, I have a few more techniques that I wanted to share with this big brush. I tell you, I just can't stop playing with it. I feel like you can make cards for days. This time I'm using that Bronzite Genuine again, the one that has all this shimmer, and I've mixed it with just a little touch of quinacridone rose. And I love this when it has like these little skips like that. It's just something you couldn't make on your own. It just kind of magically happens. And I found that you get this look with the rougher paper. So this is the Arches Cold Press watercolor paper that I'm working on once again. You don't get this effect as quite as much with the Canson XL paper. So getting like a nice juicy load of quinacridone rose, and I'm going to make a really nice stripe right down the middle here. Just like that, and watch the two bronzite stripes really mingle together with the quinacridone rose. Isn't that just so pretty? Then one last trick I wanted to share, and that is taking a damp brush. So this brush is a little bit damp, and then playing with the bristles and separating them so that you kind of fan it out like that with your thumb. And then dip it in some color. You can even like pull it out some more while you're dipping it in the color. And then watch what happens when you go on the Arches paper. Isn't that just the coolest? So this was a really damp brush, and then I just picked up some paint and fanned out those bristles extra well. So cool. So now I finished up this batch of cards, and I really love these. So this one, I made use of some scraps from when I tried to make some stripes with some different colors, and I didn't really like how it came out for a card, but it's awesome for these trees. I think it really goes with the whole modern look of them. And then I had to do some holly too, of course, because I couldn't let this paper go to waste. It has really cool granulation. I hope you can see all of that on there. It's like super granulated. And then the last set of cards are these, and they're super simple, but once again, that bronzite watercolor really adds shimmer and sparkle to them. I sure hope you've enjoyed all the techniques that I've shared with the Da Vinci number 30 big brush. I had so much fun making all of these cards, and I could have kept going and going. So I thought I'd share a look back at some of the other cards and techniques that we did. Here are the Northern Light backgrounds and the polar bears. And just making simple, bold stripes with the big brush also makes for some really cool cards. And it's a great way to get used to the size and the feel of the brush as well. So thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you'll give these techniques a try.